So I'm here with Don Peppers at the Igniter conference. This is PodSource, and we're at the Computer History Museum.
Great.
Don just gave
Thanks, Jeremy.
a really excellent talk.
Says you. Thank you very much.
I think most of the people feel the same way. So you've written a bunch of books, right? And you're sort of an expert on business building and I guess trust in the workplace. So why don't you speak a little on that.
Anything on the customer-facing side of a business is what my practice has been for the last 40 years, and I enjoy it. I've been in sales and marketing and worked with customer service companies and so forth, and I talk a lot about the impact of computers and interactivity on business practices. Okay,
so do you mostly work with startups, or do you work at hosting with events? Or
I like working with startups a lot. I don't get enough experience doing it. I don't get to do it that much. The Igniters conference I like because it's unique. It's all startups. It's very interesting. Cool group of people in the audience. I advise a couple of startups, but mostly as Winston Churchill said when he went on the speaking circuit, mostly I live mouth to hand. Okay, I charge for my speaking and I go all over the world. I've spoken in 65 countries, and next month I'm going to Borneo for the first time, so 66.
66. Yeah. That's great. So you do a lot of public speaking, right?
Yes.
And if there was, do you have any takeaways that, a young founder that you try to instill in anyone?
I think there's one big takeaway from what I try to talk to the Igniters conference about today is customers are harder to get than capital, okay? There is an infinite amount of capital in the world. If you have a good return on your investment, you can always find the money to make the investment from a VC company or a private equity firm or the public market or your Uncle Vinny, okay? Somebody, if there's a good return, is going to be willing to lend you or invest the money for you. But there are only a finite number of customers in the world. You may have millions of them, but you can still count them one at a time. And when you found a business, your goal should be to maximize the value that each current and prospective customer can create for your business. That should be your overall goal.
And so how would you go about doing that for an early stage startup?
Sure. Think about the story behind the design of your customer experience. 99% of companies, unless your name is Disney, customers don't come to you for the experience of buying. They come to you to solve a problem or to meet some need. And if that problem or need would just go away magically without them having to lift a finger, that would be the ideal customer experience. The ideal experience is no experience, right? The need goes away. So you should view every point of friction in your category's customer experience as an entrepreneurial opportunity. That's your opportunity. And your customers, they're your disruptors. They're the front line of disruption. Because if you can patch a piece of friction up and strip away an ounce worth of effort on my part as a customer, that make it a little bit less effortful for me to have to undertake to solve my problem, you're going to have a business.
Interesting. So how did you've written books on this and you speak on it often. How did you get from point A to point B? How did you become this incisive thinker in that space?
Well, back in the 1990s, I had an opportunity. I worked for an advertising agency and I was asked to talk about the impact of interactivity. So I asked myself the question, this was before the internet, okay? And people thought interactivity at the time in the advertising business, people thought interactivity was going to be when you see a commercial on TV that a product you push a button and a coupon would print out on your set-top box. That's what people thought interactivity was, right? But my job was getting new clients for my ad agency. And so I spent my mornings cold calling marketing vice presidents and directors of marketing at different target companies and trying to talk to them on the phone And my goal was not to talk to them, but to get them to talk to me. And I write down what they tell me, and that's ring binders. So 6 months later, I'd call you back. Hey, Jeremy, yeah, it's Don Peppers again. But how'd that product launch go in South America? You were going to do that. Did it go okay? So I want to have a relationship with you, so that when I read in the trade press that your advertising account is going to go up for grabs, you'll take my call. That's all I wanted. I want a relationship. So I'm asked to give this speech on the impact of interactivity, and I do a little thought experiment. Imagine a time, I'm thinking to myself, when a child can talk back to Tony the Tiger in a Kellogg's commercial. What would Kellogg's do with the information that the child gave? And the answer is they wouldn't do anything with it. They're a mass marketer. The child's not representative of a market. It's anecdotal information. But that's what I was doing. I was trying to get customers, prospects to talk to me so I could set up a relationship. So the insight was, when interactivity happens, every company, even consumer companies, are going to want to set up relationships with their customers, individual relationships, and use computers to do that. So there was a woman in the audience. She said, "You ought to write a book." I said, "I'm really busy." She said, "Well, I'm a college professor." So we teamed up, and 3 years later, we had our book out, The One-to-One Future: Building Relationships One Customer at a Time. And we predicted when interactivity happened, the big growth industry would be e-commerce. We had a chapter called "Take Products to Customers," not customers to products. We predicted social media, that image tribes of people getting together online with sewing circles for the connected age. We even predicted the gig economy. We suggested that interactivity would create a whole lot of opportunities, not just for remote working. Instead of the haves and have-nots, you'd have the theirs and their nots in the workplace. But also for people starting their own businesses independently. We thought we were writing a book of business science fiction for 20 years, 10, 20 years minimum, before we had fiber optic in the home. But literally 6 months after our book came out in '93, the first commercial web browser became available, and the dot-com races were off and running, and our book became a cult hit. And then Martha and I have written 11 books since then, if you count the 3 editions of our textbook as 3 separate books, which you should. Yeah. Because they are. But it's been a fantastic run, and I've enjoyed it every bit of the way. I've started a company. We have offices we had at one point offices on nearly every continent, the Peppers & Rogers Group. We were the largest management consulting firm in some parts of the world, Turkey, for instance. We're very influential in the Middle East. We still operate in the U.S. But we sold our company, and Martha and I started this business, CX Speakers, and now we're back to going out and speaking.
Teaching
we
people
enjoy.
this.
Yeah, teaching.
And if there's one motif that's really been very clear throughout the whole Igniter conference and in these interviews as well, is relationships and trusts are integral.
Vital.
There's maybe nothing more important.
Right, I agree 100%.
So I think there's a lot packed in there, right? And I mean, in your talk, you mentioned, Amazon does a really good job. You can send boxes back or whatever, and it's free. They don't want you to have any negative thoughts. So what I'm wondering, and I'm sure plenty of people are wondering, being in Silicon Valley with lots of early stage companies, is how do you create trust when you don't have the resources that Amazon or Google or Apple or a giant has?
Well, I think creating trust is almost a matter of mindset. It's how you design your business model. My feeling is that companies can make money in the short term by fooling customers or taking advantage of their oversights and mistakes, but that's only in the short term. And in the long term, trust is the most profitable business strategy. So if the customer thinks that you always have their interests at heart, that you're going to do what you consider right for them, that you're going to treat them like you'd want to be treated if you were them, if the customers believe that, then they'll want to buy from you. Well, and why wouldn't they? They'll want to open your email because when you send an email, it's something that you think they'll enjoy or get use out of. So that's the kind of relationship you want with your customers. And I think it's a complicated business. It's very un-20th century because the 20th century was based on mass marketing, production economy. Customers were obstacles that lay between you and a profit, basically. It was the products that gave you a profit. And now, with interactivity, customers are the business. And you can look at the market capitalizations of the FANG companies, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google. And they're all in goodwill, what is that? It's the value of the customers and prospective customers. Okay, that's not on the balance sheet, but the financial value of the company, the many billions of dollars the company's worth. It's not in computer servers and ping pong tables at the corporate headquarters. It's in the value of customers. That's the future of business. Is focusing on your customers as your primary financial asset and trying to conserve that asset and grow it over time.
It's interesting too, the fact the FANG companies are notorious for having a very good work culture, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think it goes.
Of course, they had an advantage too, because the advantage was they started new. Okay, they're all new. They didn't have legacy systems and legacy operating processes, and many of them were fundamentally owner managed. Bezos is a really good example at Amazon. I laugh when I see Wall Street analysts complaining that Amazon doesn't have its shareholders' interests at heart because they're not giving out dividends or they're spending too much on growing customers. Excuse me, Bezos is the biggest shareholder. He's worth way more than any of you pikers, and he's the one who's calling the shots here. Of course, they have the shareholders' interests at heart.
Yeah, and in a big way too. People love Amazon because of Bezos. People loved Apple because of Steve Jobs. It's trust. You trust that these guys have the right mindset to build the company, right?
One of my favorite examples, Bezos wrote in his letter to shareholders in 2013, he said, when customers call in to the contact center, we don't want those calls to come in, but we recognize sometimes there are problems. So they call in and they talk to a customer service agent and they complain that the product wasn't delivered on time or their video didn't stream well. And so what does the agent do? Well, they look on the computer. The computer knows. The computer knows that it sees that the product wasn't delivered on the day it was promised or that the video buffered improperly, whatever. And so they issue the refund. So Bezos says, so if the computer knows they're due a refund, why do we make them call in? And now they send the refund out proactively. If you do a refund, you're going to get an email from Amazon. You don't have to call in. That is what I call trustability, proactive trustworthiness. And that's the kind of trust that companies are coming to expect.
That's awesome.
Customers are.
So I guess we'll conclude with this. You mentioned in one of your early books that you were predicting, the gig economy and social media. So do you have any big thoughts on the future or any ideas for even 2019 or the next 5 years?
I think the future is human, very human, and I think that artificial intelligence and voice bots and other mechanized, computer-driven technologies are marvelous. They make the customer experience more and more frictionless, and they're becoming more and more perfect, and there's less problem. But I think people are social, and regardless of science fiction movies or whatever, I don't think people are going to relate in a personal way with voice bots. Let me give you a quick example. There's a company in Australia, and that has a contact center. And when a customer calls in, and there's a dispute of some kind, and the customer is not happy because the product didn't work the way it was supposed to, but maybe they didn't follow the instructions the right way, maybe the instructions weren't clear. It's clearly something that the agent knows that the customer's partly at fault, the customer knows the company's partly at fault. they've authorized their agents to say to the customer, okay, Mr. Strike, you're partly responsible, and we are too. I recognize that. What would you consider fair?
That's a good
And
one.
then they stop.
Yeah.
And you make a suggestion, and we take it. Now, that immediately creates a human bond between the customer and the business, because no voice bot would ever do that. And if it did, the customer, if it knew that it was a voice bot, the customer would take advantage of it, because who cares about what a voice bot thinks, you know? But human to human interaction, I think, is something that's been deprecated and cheapened by companies' rush to automation in funny ways. And I'm not attacking the benefits of automation at all. It's immense benefits, but a lot of companies automate primarily to reduce costs, not to improve their customer experience. And they're going to have to change their ways.
Don Peppers. This is
Thank you very
great.
much, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Thank you.